Okay, let me jump in for 1 second.
Yeah.
This question is about to lead up to. I know this is going to be the one. This is going to be the question. You're going to enjoy this question because
But let's not forget the previous question. I'm still trying to come around to answering why did he make a straw man out of Parmenides and Heraclitus?
Okay, you know what? You're right. Let's do that first. Go ahead.
But don't forget it. Don't forget this.
Yeah, I got my note though. I got a really good question that's going to follow up.
All right. So here's the thing. In the context of this culture of mimesis, of unreflective imitation, and the basically unthinking absorption of traditional cultural values, right? In what had for centuries been an oral culture, these sages like Parmenides, Heraclitus, Pythagoras are breaking out of that, and they're teaching people to think for themselves. But the people who they're teaching are an extremely minuscule elite. Okay? And by elite, I don't necessarily just mean wealthy people, although that tended to be the class of people in the Pythagorean schools in Sicily, for example. But they were teaching, at the very least, we can say, a very rarefied spiritual elite. And so they had the luxury of engaging in very esoteric manners of expression, very cryptic and profoundly thought-provoking formulations of the kind that you find in Heraclitus and in Parmenides. And in the school of Pythagoras, I mean, the guy didn't even write down anything. It was not permitted at his time, in his own time, to write down his teaching. And he had two grades of followers, at least, one of which was in front of the curtain, sitting at his feet, and the others of which had to sit behind a curtain that separated him from them. So Pythagoras is the original man behind the curtain. That's where the expression comes from.
Wow.
So point being, these esoteric sages were not really changing the society of the time. And in fact, when the Pythagorean order was in danger of reshaping the society of Sicily, when it started to have significant sociopolitical influence, the aristocrats riled up the mob and they set fire to the Pythagorean schools. And this is how Pythagoras ultimately died himself. He either died in the fire or from wounds that he sustained during the burning of the Pythagorean schools by the mobs of Sicily, who were riled up by aristocrats. So Plato's look, and then of course Plato sees how his own teacher Socrates is executed by the Democratic Assembly of Athens for provoking people to think for themselves and question authority and question custom and tradition. And so Plato realizes that it's not enough to express yourself in this esoteric and cryptic form and convey deep truths by that means, the way that Heraclitus and Parmenides did. You have to build a theory of knowledge that you can institutionalize in an academy, which then becomes responsible for educating the youth, rather than allowing them to be corrupted by what they're absorbing through Homer, for example, right? And in point of fact, Plato does set up the first academy. But, what we have to remember about Plato, who sets up the first academy, is that before he met Socrates, he was an aspiring tragic poet. He had written this tragedy that he was going to submit to a competition in the theater of Dionysus. And the story is that after he heard Socrates talk, he burned his great tragedy in an offering to Prometheus. He calls forth the god of fire and burns his great tragedy that he was going to enter into this competition and all of the rest of the poetry he had written up to that point, and decides to become a student of Socrates. But he's coming from the background of having been a tragic poet. And of course, Dionysus is the god associated with tragedy. And then it's reputed that Plato, when he died, was discovered to have had a copy of Aristophanes' comedies under his pillow, which he slept on every night.
Wow.
Okay, which he took to bed with him. And when you look at the symposium, toward the end of Plato's symposium, there's this conversation between Aristophanes, who appears as a character in that dialogue, and a representative of comedy, and Agathon, who's a tragedian. And Aristophanes and Agathon, after everybody else has fallen to sleep, they're all drunk and they're falling asleep. They're all sprawled all over the floors. These two are the last ones awake. And as the dawn is rising, they're having a conversation about whether there could be a new form of art beyond the binary of tragedy and comedy. And I think that this is what Plato wanted philosophy to be, that he's conceiving of philosophy as a new art form that embraces the best qualities of both the tragic view of the world that you see in like Heraclitus and comedy. In other words,
is this where you get the satires? This is where you get the satires from? They try to merge the two together?
Yeah, and okay. In Symposium, Alcibiades, who is this scandalous politician and disciple of Socrates, actually people say he was trying to become Socrates' lover. Alcibiades gives this eulogy of Socrates with the Maenads all dancing around to the flute tunes of Dionysus. Okay, this is the backdrop. As this Dionysian ritual is taking place and everyone's drinking and they're playing the Dionysian flutes and the Maenads are all dancing around, Alcibiades gives us this eulogy of Socrates. And he says Socrates is a trickster. He is a pharmacus, a witch doctor who has brought us a pharmacon. It was snake poison that was used by traditional doctors as a cure. So in the right amount, it's a medicine,
Venom.
But in excessive doses, it will kill you. And he says he's been subjected to the venom of Socrates' poison, and it's driven him mad. And that Socrates deploys all these arguments in an apparently rational manner, but really what he's trying to do is drive a person toward a kind of divine madness. And he admits to having been driven there himself by Socrates. And so we get this. Why does Plato present this image of Socrates in Symposium? And why, in the same dialogue, does Socrates say that Eros is the only thing that he's ever understood and the only thing that he worships? Socrates says this in Symposium. Excuse me, what happened to the forms?
Right.
Right? So Diotima, he had this teacher, Socrates had this teacher, Diotima, who, according to Plato and how he writes the Symposium, taught Socrates this great mystery of Eros as the ultimate,
did a video on this
enigma, the ultimate secret, right? That, divine love, in the sense of the erotic,
yeah,
is somehow the ultimate key to wisdom, right? And essentially, it's a Western form of Tantra, okay? And
he lays out how he said, look at the stories of Homer. Every time a character's in trouble, Eros comes, he strikes his bow, and makes one of these lovely ladies fall in love with the hero and save them. Eros is always, he said, Eros, according to Longus from the novel Daphnis and Chloe, Eros has more power than Zeus himself. He has the power over all the elements. That's like, what? What the hell is Socrates talking about?